you, Ruchi, for such a energy pack and like a deep dive yet comprehensive talk. I think you touched up like different pieces and make it like such a nice story connecting together. I'm sure people would have like a lot of curiosity to further go through your papers, and they are like really detailed and can come back to you. So, Ruchi, we have a couple of questions, and if you click on your screen on Q&A tab, you can see all those questions. And how we would want you to go through, you can pick up the questions and answer. There are like 4 5 people who want to come on a panel and have their question one-to-one. So typically we spend 5 to 7 minutes sort of on panel. You can choose and respond, and I will bring those people. Before that, you can pick the questions and then start responding. So total, there are 13 questions so far. And can you see that on your screen? If you click
see the question.
Q&A, and then a window will pop up.
I can see the questions. Should I? How should I go about them?
So probably Ruchi, you can read it. So you can read the question you are answering, and people can listen because they cannot see all the questions. So you have to just pick what you are responding.
I will start with questions which are more relevant to my talk. I know there were some Corona questions there.
That's fine. You can skip.
Yeah, but let me start with the ones, and then maybe we can go back to some, because I guess the talk before me, Dr. Gagandeep has really gone through a lot of deep depth about coronavirus. So let me start with some of the questions which are more on antibiotic resistance, but I can come back if we can have a discussion on the other. So there was one question which says, it's an anonymous attendee, what will be the problem with antibiotic resistance in future, and how will we deal with it? That's one of the questions that is there. So antibiotic resistance is never going to go away. I just want to say that, what happens is there are 2 parts to antibiotic resistance. One is abuse of drugs, which is not even got to do with science. It has got to do with awareness. I mean, science means development of drugs. If you abuse the drug, for example, in India, we use like whatever happens, we don't even wait. And many times off-the-counter antibiotic resistance drugs are available. So if you keep taking drugs, then you will have this problem of resistance developing very fast. And you will need stronger and stronger or different drugs. So one of the problems is not even a science-based problem, it is more an awareness problem, where you should, and if you take an antibiotic, you can't leave it after 2 days. You have to complete the course. Because if you don't do that, you end up with some amount of bacteria that has been exposed to the antibiotic, and it is learning to live with it. We double, I don't know, we double very slowly, I would say every 50 years or something, generations, you can say 20 years, maybe, but bacteria double in less than 20 minutes. So they have a lot of leverage for evolution. So what we are trying to do is, many of these resistance mechanisms are being borrowed by these bacteria, by these drug producing, for coming to the science part. Antibiotic resistance, many of them are, they borrow it. For example, this methylation that I was talking about, they borrow it from streptomyces. They already have this. So they say, can we have those genes which will help us and not penetrate the cell wall, or can we have genes which will help us not methylate the ribosomes, or can we have genes which will close all pumps, so that the antibiotic cannot enter the cell or leave the cell, stuff like that. So all these are already there. And so what we are trying to do is that if you can look at these evolved pathways and then do combination therapy. For example, what we were planning here to do was, you take the same macrolide and you combine it with something which would not allow this resistance mechanism to come in play. But we also have to keep searching for new targets at the same time. So it's a chicken and an egg problem, where it's like a race. You always have to be a little bit ahead. You can never be completely winning the game, and it will never happen that antibiotic resistance is gone. So only by control and controlled use of antibiotics, proper use, and by coming up with strategies which are a little bit ahead of the bacteria, by understanding how they are developing resistance, we can combat it. So that, but we'll never win. It's not like tomorrow antibiotic resistance will be gone. Then there is another question which says, in the slide on docking studies using various nucleobases, what about the interaction with IMP, inosine monophosphate, right? Since it is an important factor in the de novo biosynthesis of guanine nucleotides? That's a very good question. It's again an anomalous attendee. If I go back and like I was telling, when we first found this mycobacterium enzyme, we were very, very perplexed as to what the function was. We did not know it was going to be a completely, mutagenic base. So we tried IMP, yes. We tried, we even tried not mono, we tried di and tri also. But what happened is, you look at the size of the active site. It turned out that our active site was not big enough to take very huge substrates like IMP. So there's a score that is given. And I told you, remember that the base to be deaminated should be in close proximity of the zinc. If that doesn't happen, and you cannot get the reaction to happen. So not only do we look at whether this substrate is good, we look at a docking score, we also look at the orientation. And that's where having the structure becomes so important. Because now from the structure and the docking, we can look at whether it's feasible or not. If it's completely upside down in the active site, there's no point in pursuing it. So IMP, unfortunately, did not come up as a candidate. And we have tested mono, di, and tri nucleobases also. We were like desperate at that time. So yes, we have tested them, but they were not very high in the score, and they did not go very well in the during the thing. So there is another question. In amylin, there are two NH2 groups, and in the presence of MSD, only one NH2 group is converted into C double bond selectively. What is the expected reason? Now, amylin is a completely symmetrical type of molecule, and it may turn out that the other NH2 is actually involved in hydrogen bonding, and once that is gone, then the amylide may not be a good substrate anymore. So you may need the other NH2. It's like, if you look, we have treated amylin like a purine, because the next ring is about to start there. So the purine make additional interactions over there, and it becomes very loose in the active site the minute you have one C double bond O converted, and it's no longer able to go back and fit there. So that is most likely the reason that the other NH2 is not getting deaminated. So then there is a question by Saptarushi Mandal. What is your opinion about using sensitizers in combating bacterial resistance? I think I talked about a lot about bacterial resistance already. If I don't know what kind of sensitizers you're talking about. If you mean combination drugs, then yes. If you mean immune system targeting ones, then it's a more difficult thing to do, and you can understand what's going on. So Debarita Basu, what was the length of the simulation where you saw the channel opening? So we did the simulation for 1000 nanoseconds. It was 1 microsecond, multiple simulations. We did around 3 or 4, and we were able to see the channel opening event and the channel was open, and it opened and closed. But after 200 nanoseconds, the system stabilized, and only then we started seeing this allosteric switch open up, and then the channel remained open for some part of the simulation. So it was a 1000 nanosecond simulation that we did, and we did multiple, so maybe around 4000 total. Anirudh Seal, could you please explain how do you go on finding the gates and confirming they are actually functionally important? Important in the middle part of the talk, yes. So, so this is about ammonia tunneling that I had talked about. I don't know whether I can go there. I can. So I actually skipped that portion in the interest of time, because I don't even have a slide here, but I will tell you what we did in brief. This is what I think Anirudh was talking about, this slide. I don't know if you guys can see this slide. I'm still sharing the screen, I think. And so you can see here, this is the channel. And what we did was, to find out whether this was a channel or not, we made several mutations here. Now you have to make mutations very, very carefully. If you make very big, large mutations, then what happens is the protein becomes unstable, and then they are not really telling you anything about the enzyme. But if you, for example, you see this valine over here, We mutated this to isoleucine. We solved the structure of this enzyme also. And what we saw by biochemical studies was that once you do this, you are kind of obstructing the path of the ammonia. So ammonia is being produced at the same rate, but it is not getting utilized at the same rate. Okay, so here because ammonia is not reaching at the same speed, so you see leaking, you see leakage of ammonia that happens. And we were able to show by crystallography also that we have actually a paper, and this we did it actually before we even did the simulation. It's an ACS chemical biology paper. You can look up my publications online if you go to my website, and you'll be able to see a paper where we show how this particular mutation works. There is more work, which is not unpublished work, where we have changed all these different amino acids at the top and even at the bottom. And what we have found is that that actually when you mutate arginine, for example, in some of them, you enhance the activity of the enzyme by 25%. That means it can produce more ammonia. And ammonia production increases. But ammonia production and ammonia consumption has to be coupled in a way. And we're trying to do these coupled experiments now. We also mutated this histidine, and histidine is actually tied to a threonine over here, and we mutated both of them. And this histidine also interacts with FCAR, the substrate. So this histidine is very important, and the gate opening happens because this histidine donates donates a proton, and then it breaks this hydrogen bond, and the gate opening happens because now it changes its conformation to interact with the substrate. And that's how the gate opening happens. And we became more sure about our studies, because with all the mutagenic studies that we did in the path of the channel and at the end of at the start of the channel, which I did not quite go into because of the interest of time. So I hope I was able to answer your question, Anirudh. Then we have Realme. I mean, must be a name like just alias. Due to some mutation during targeting and particular antibiotic binding to two sites, either it binds to a target site. I don't know. What I'm trying to understand that your question most likely is that mutations at a target site can prevent antibiotic binding, right? If that's what. So it is very difficult for the ribosome to have mutations, if it's a ribosome you're talking about, in that region. It's a very conserved region of the ribosome. And it's very important for integrity. So instead of mutating, sometimes what happens in gyrases, for example, in topoisomerases, you have spontaneous mutations happens, and the enzyme becomes such that it changes its activity. But here, instead of changing its activity, because ribosome is such a conserved molecule and such a important process for translation, it doesn't want to mutate the ribosome. What it does, it adds appendages to the ribosome, like a methylation mark. So that is also like mutating. It is no longer an adenine molecule. Now it's adenine with a methyl group, new base, or dimethyl, two methyl groups. So you can have a mutation where the base itself becomes from adenine to a guanine, or you can have a mutation which is added on mutation where adenine changes into something else by addition of an external agent. Not only methylation, there are also examples of acetylation that happens on the ribosome like this. So ribosome, which is a very conserved molecule, the bacteria thinks it's a dangerous process to change it. So instead of changing the ribosome, what it does is it epigenetically or post-translationally modifies it. And that's like a pseudo mutation that is happening. And that's what we're trying to stop. Because it's a pseudo mutation, we can stop it from happening. That's what we think. Is it possible to change the structure of an enzyme by retaining its functional capacity? If yes, then how? So you can make certain changes in the structure, not complete changes in the structure, and people do it by directed evolution a lot these days, where they keep the active site pretty much same, but the structure is changed. Now you can think about it. We are very bad at doing it, but look at this enzyme itself. There is something called triose isomerase fold, which is a TIM barrel. It's a barrel type fold. You need water to be occluded. Same set of residues like zinc binding enzyme, zinc dependent enzyme, zinc binding and activating groups are there in humans also. And in bacteria also, completely different fold is there. Only thing that is important is in both cases, reaction happens in the and zinc is activated and it's occluded. So you can try to do it by directed evolution. We are not very good at it. Nature has billions and zillions of years, so it has found different scaffolds which can do the same reaction by mutation. So nature has been able to do it in nucleobased deaminases. Same reaction is happening in bacteria, completely different looking enzyme, and in humans in a completely different looking enzymes. The mechanism most likely is the same in both cases. But the looks of the enzyme are completely different. If we want to do it, we can try directed evolution type approaches. Whether we will be successful or not, we don't know, but there's a chance. But nature has had, it's like alternate scaffolds for the same thing. Nature has figured it out. So something like that. Sue Mehta, Shush Mehta has asked this question: what will happen instead of methylation if we do with ethyl or with even bulkier group? So the problem is, even so I skip this part. Even with methylation, mono and dimethylation are there. The bacteria does not want dimethylation to happen until unless it's completely dying. It doesn't want it. Why? Because if you have dimethylation, then what happens is, this is a tunnel. You have a pebble here, okay? If you have two pebbles, then the new protein which is being produced will have a tough time being formed. If you put a bigger pebble, then it will be like a macrolide, right? Bacteria wants to live. Why macrolides don't work? Because they are huge boulders which are there. Ethyl group is bigger than methyl group. So adding bigger groups means some of the proteins of the bacteria may not get translated. And that's not good. Bacteria would not even like a dimethyl mark if possible, and if resistance can be stopped. So it happens many times that methylation is the minimal mark that bacteria can get away with. So it's doing it. So it doesn't want to do bulkier marks. It doesn't want to have any additional groups more than required, because after methylation, still the ribosome has to produce these 5,000 proteins I was talking about. And any 10, 15 of them stop because of this methylation mark, then bacteria has to suffer. And the minute this antibiotic is pressure is taken away, methylation also stops. The ribosome does not methylate anymore. So there are mechanisms in which only under dire circumstances methylation is happening. So ethyl group adding bacteria would not like, because limited space, not bulkier than it needs to be. Is there any gatekeeper type residue like kinase which controls the activity of the active site? I'm assuming this is question is for the channeling part. In channeling, I told you there are two gates, and those are the gatekeepers. I already explained histidine, and there's a arginine, arginine aspartic acid or glutamic acid, aspartic acid, I think, couple, which is a gate over there. So there are gates, and there are these gating residues which control ammonia production. Bhumika, is there any role of post-translation modification in resistance? Yes, obviously this post-translation modification, I only discussed about macrolide. There are other positions where aminoglycosides are also methylated. Ribosomes are methylated in other positions also, and they bring about resistance. There is also acetylation where resistance happens. So there are different kinds of post-translation modifications, and the goal is to stop them by putting a minimal group to stop something more worse, like a macrolide or a bigger molecule at the strategic position. There's a steric clash from actually binding. So they don't want these drugs to bind, and that's why they are doing it. Nitin, last part, have you measured the KD with protein with RNA? And what does it come come out with conserved motif? Have you also tried with longer RNA? We have tried with longer RNA. We have measured the KD. It's actually, I skipped the slide. There is a slide which we have used fluorescence anisotropy to do the study. We have done it with all the sequences. Actually, we used it to prove that when we make modifications, fluorescent modifications, the protein RNA complex is still fine. So it's in the nanomolar range. And longer RNA will also work, or longer RNA works. It's just that we actually are trying to shorten our RNA because we're trying to solve the structure. So we wanted to find a minimal template that works. Obviously, longer RNA is ribosome itself. Ribosome works. So for KSGA, for example, if you can do the whole ribosome and it works. But for ERM, the whole ribosome does not work because this active site gets completely buried inside. SAC-SANS will help you to get low resolution information. And that, thank you. We appreciate that. We do want low resolution information or high resolution information. We are trying various strategies now. We are actually tethering the RNA with the protein so that we are able to get the crystals. We can do FACS, but it's a pretty small molecule, one monomer and one RNA. So it's a little difficult problem that way. To tackle by SACs. A bigger molecule with a bigger envelope would be simpler, but we are trying other strategies which we think might work this way. Why we did this fluorescence study is it tells you step by step which nucleobase is actually interacting and which nucleobase is changing conformation. Overall, it would be very good to be able to get the structure. That would be our goal. In the absence, yes, we can try the other techniques like you said. Can you please tell us some more points about MST? MST is the first part of my talk. It's a deaminase and it only does mutagenic bases. And it selectively can do mutagenic bases over natural bases. So the active site is designed in such a way that it will scan through a normal base and it will not deaminate it. Because the reaction for deaminating a normal base is much more difficult. And then it will take a mutagenic base with a particular scaffold, and these are triazine-based scaffolds, and many drugs are triazine-based, which are in the market, and Mycobacterium is kind of resistant to them. But we can only confirm this as a drug target if we knock it out, and then we figure it more things about it, and that's what we're trying to do now. And to see if it's an essential enzyme or it just does it become sensitive to triazine. So there are a lot of more questions and answers that we got about MST. But MST can deaminate only mutagenic bases. That's what we have figured out. There are two, one purine, isoguanine, and pyrimidine azocytosine are the only two bases that can natural mutagenic bases that it can do. How targeting methyltransferase we can reverse antibiotic resistance. In short, I think I've told you, what we don't want is this methylation to happen. So if we can stop this methyltransferase from methylating, from even approaching the target site. So you can, if it cannot interact with the RNA or the ribosome, forget about the SAM binding site. If we remember that 20 Armstrong away, there was a bulge region which was interacting with the protein. So if we stop that interaction only, then the enzyme will not work. If the methylation doesn't happen, then old drugs like macrolides, like erythromycin and all those streptomycin and lincolnamides will work normally. You don't need new drugs then. All you need is an inhibitor for this methyltransferase enzyme, which is specific. Can antibiotic resistance pass to generation? Well, it can pass through generation if those genetic elements which caused antibiotic resistance are passed from species to species, and that's why once you get one antibiotic resistance bacteria, it gives it to the whole colony, and all of them become resistant because it is an plasmid in many cases called cassette, and it gets transferred across the bacteria, and they all become resistant. And it can also come from a different bacteria to this bacteria. For survival, they do everything. Once it is in one bacteria, the others will automatically get it during their passage and they will uptake it. So you will have more and more resistant bacteria coming out. Can we use strategies like using competitive inhibition? Yes, we would like to use strategies rather than competitive. We would like to use combination therapy here instead. One more question, first part of your project, you see the nice differential activity with purine and pyrimidine for MST protein. NMR titration and relaxation will be give more idea with structural insight. Yes, definitely. That's a good experiment we can try. We have the structures so far. So that has already told us, and NMR experiments would be very good because we are also looking at conformational changes, and we are actually undergoing the studies where we look at changes in the loop region. Right now, we are actually mutating the loop, and this study would be really helpful. Why more time required for vaccine to cure diseases? Because they mutate a lot. For flu, for example, let me come back to corona, the spike protein that they are trying to make the vaccine against. If they mutate very fast, the amino acids, because I said bacteria, for example, 20 minutes, if they can double very fast. So their evolution is happening very fast. If they mutate and they protect themselves, for example, HIV, there's no vaccine that has worked so well. HIV, there is a protein, there's a protease where they keep on acquiring mutations in their flap regions, and they keep on changing such that the protein integrity is maintained. Yet, so the way antibody works is it chooses a part of the peptide of the protein and it recognizes. If that peptide is changing continuously, you will not have the antibody work. And viruses, more so than bacteria, are very good at it. So it sometimes becomes very difficult. And if it's a very dynamic, evolving system, then you will have problems in being able to get a vaccine. For example, flu vaccine, we have not been able to get one season it works, second season the same flu vaccine doesn't work because the strain has changed. So they, because of their fast turnaround change, they can actually evolve very, very fast. And that's why I was saying it's a race that we will never get rid of it. But you can see those factors, for example, smallpox. Some viruses are slow mutating. We are able to get rid of them. Very infectious but means very deadly and slow mutating. Then you get rid of them, and you can develop a vaccine. Not so deadly but in many cases very fast mutating. You end up not getting anything which works for a while. So that's a trade-off, I guess. So I hope we can develop a vaccine which works for a long time, even for corona. That's where I think they're having challenges. Even if you get a vaccine, how long it will work and how large a population it will work on will become an issue. Why is India very much behind in drug discovery? This is a question. Because our industry and our, I feel academia don't work so much together all the time. Our industry is more interested so far in generics, and we produce copies of generics at the war footing. But we have yet not invested, or we have not built a system, I would say. And you can see that we are also a country which is coming up in science. You know, if you think about 50 years down the line, maybe the industry, the type of nascency in the industry that was there in the West also would be like that. But then they came up. So if academia and industry, the industry is ready to put in, because it's a billion. You need clinical trials. I can develop a drug. I can come up with many candidates from my talk only. But then those candidates have to be tested in some kind of human cells, which may not be difficult. I could do it. Then I have to go to mice. Then I have to go to vertebrates. You know, I have to do apes or something, and then human trials. So without industry, without a network with the doctors, without academicians, all three of them have to work together, and only then we can work. There has to be connect. So somehow, if we are able to improve the connection, we would be, and we have to believe that we can do it. So if we start believing that if the connect is made and it can be done, it will be done. So we are behind because we are still thinking that somebody else will do it and we'll copy it. So that is why we are behind many times. But that is not true. Sometimes we can also come up with things if we just start, I would say. But we need the connect. That's very important. For example, where I am, there is no medical hospital. IIT doesn't have, I mean, it's an engineering institute, but you have to work with the medical hospital together. That would be a good way to actually go about it. Okay. So, Diksha, should I keep answering the questions or how do you want me to do it? As you want, I can keep
going. Ruchi, this is totally up to you. If you have a hard stop to go, then you can just pick a few which are not repetitive and you think you can take probably 2-3 more questions and wrap it up, because I think we will keep getting.
I just wanted to know how
so maybe Ruchi, we can plan to wrap up by 7:30, so we have 15 more minutes and you can pick probably 4-5 more questions here, and then 3-4 questions from panel. So in 15 minutes we can pick up 7-8 more questions. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure. Yeah. We have a question by Vishal Sharma. Can conformational changes be restricted in protein RNA interaction or any system if we reduce the interfacial linkage network? Or what will be the effect of this approach in broader regarding overall functionality? Now, what I was trying to impress Vishal was that these conformational changes are the key to the reactivity. If you don't allow the protein and the RNA to actually take the correct conformation, it may be away from the active site also. So the recognition depends. Recognition is a fluid process. It's not like lock and key as we imagine. That's what I think. Like a static process. It may be that the whole thing, if you remember some science fiction movies, the whole thing may move around a lot, and then it clicks. It may not be like a click like this. It could be a click where it may not be a click like this. It can be a click like this. Now there's a lot. I started with my hand like this, and then as I closed, I changed the conformation, and then there was a click and I closed, right? So here, if I look at these photographs, I would not get an idea that this is the click. So conformational changes is the key to, I think, many processes, and that's why I was actually appreciating the NMR experiments, because we can get dynamics information from there. And what we need to know in many cases is what is the so that's why many times, even if I get a photograph, I need to get a photograph like this, I want to get a photograph like this, I want to get a photograph like this, if I'm working only in photographs. But if I have another technique by which I can do dynamics, I can get the photograph from, I can get this closed form by a dynamics. So functionality is very much dependent on conformation, and if we freeze the conformation of either the protein or the RNA, both ways we are not allowing it to function properly. And so that is why you can have not a proper handshake if any one of them cannot do its conformational change. So there is something called, if you read about it, there is something called cluster where these clustering networks that are there, where correlation networks, where this amino acid, for example, here may be related to this amino acid, because at some point they're going to have some correlation. And so these correlation networks tell you a lot about, or linkage networks, as you were asking, tell you a lot about how the different parts of the protein may be connected. And people do a lot of studies on this. It's a very popular topic to be able to understand how different parts of the protein, which look seemingly very far away, are actually correlated to each other. What is, in your opinion, about using photosensitizers in combating bacterial resistance, photodynamic therapy? So you're saying you have a caged molecule and then you actually break the cage and then deliver the drug. That's more like a delivery problem. And if you already know your target and you know your drug, that's a very good approach, because then you would not have off-target effects. But here we are looking at, what if you don't know what the drug, if the drug stops working, then what do you do? If the drug stops working, what is the new drug to develop? Do I look for another target, or do I look for origin of resistance? Why has this drug stopped working? Can I not let this happen? So photodynamic therapy would be very useful if you want to target it to the right site and you don't want anywhere else in places which are not, it doesn't need to go. Targeting would be very good with these. Which factor plays a vital role in the selectivity of bacterial interaction towards the organs? Availability of that. So in a bacterial infection, the entry is the most important point. For example, forget about bacterial, even viral, you have this entry point, and you are going to have the lodging in, and once the lodging in happens, then the bacteria can enter. It has to enter your system to be able to kill it, right? So entry is a huge issue that I think is there. Did I miss anybody's question? Let me see. In the middle, I did miss. There's a question by Manoj Shobne. It says, kindly explain if combination of two or more antibiotics of different chemistries together react with the bacteria, or do they should belong to the same chemical class to undergo methylation? I don't understand your question here, but you can use more than one antibiotic. You want to kill the bacteria for sure. The methylation is happening by an enzyme that is being borrowed by this particular pathogen from somewhere, and this methylation, methyl puts a methylation mark on the ribosome. So you can have many antibiotics. The methylation mark only works on one of them. If you want it to work on another one, you will have to develop another combination drug for it. So it's a little tedious process. It's not like one drug for all, but it will make sure that resistance is not back, at least fast enough. ERN has to mutate now, and it has to take a long time to mutate. I mean, you can try to take points which it will be difficult for it to mutate. You can have candidate areas where mutations are slow. So is it possible to make drugs which target ribosome to stop the access of viral or bacterial enzymes? So viruses does not have virus doesn't use its own machinery, doesn't use its own ribosome. So please do not try to stop our own ribosomes, what it's using to make its own proteins. So no, for viruses, no. For bacteria, exactly that's what is done. A lot of our drugs are protein translation drugs which go to the bacterial ribosome, and that's how we have actually been working with antibiotics. Not all antibiotics. And remember, in the beginning, I showed you various regions of the antibiotic. There are drugs which are developed against the cell wall entry part. There are drugs which are so that you don't let the bacteria enter only, and that's the most important part. Then there are drugs for RNA polymerase drugs. There are essential pathway drugs, like you can have polyketype pathways which are there. Then there are drugs for viruses, topoisomerases, which are very popular drugs. So there are many kinds of drugs which are there for different pathways. So bacteria, it's easier because the number of pathways that you can inhibit are much more. But for virus, I told you there are very few enzymes, and those are the only enzymes that you can work with. And that's why antivirals are so difficult to develop as compared to antibacterials. Okay, Diksha, if I can.
Sure.
Is it
so, yeah. So, Ruchi, we have on panel Udipta, Divya, Padampriya, and Rajarshi. Who wants to go first? We have last 7 minutes. So, whoever have a question for, yeah. Can you please introduce yourself? Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I am Rajesh Bhattacharya, ma'am. Very nice talk. I am from Indian Institute of Science. I am a PhD student under Professor T.K. Chakravarti. So I have been working on this small molecule synthesis. I have two basic questions. One is the structure of the enzyme methyl transferase is well elucidated?
Yes,
If
yes.
so, then why don't we target that enzyme itself to stop transferring the methyl group?
Okay, sorry, continue. I'll tell you then.
Yeah. That is one question, and the other one is there any alternative, like say for example, bacteriophages? I mean, not drugs, but viruses which feed on specific bacteria that we can use to stop this bacterial resistance, antibiotic resistance. These are the two questions.
Okay, so let me answer the first question first. So if you look the enzyme, the structure, let me, maybe I don't have it here, but maybe here, okay? This part, let's take this one. This is the structure of the enzyme. Now, it has something called a SAM binding site, not the best slide, back, where we had solved the structure of the KSG. Maybe here. So if you can see here, there's a structure of this enzyme with and without SAM bound. Can you see that? So here the problem is that if you look at DNA methyltransferases, if you look at RNA methyltransferases, if you look at ribosomal methyltransferases, all of them bind this adenosine methionine molecule. So if you were to develop drugs, you would try to look at the active site and develop drugs. Okay. So the problem that poses is that you have a lot of SAM, acetylmethane. They're very important for us also, right? So all of them have this Rossmann fold, many of them actually, N6 methyltransferases. So if you use this as the target site and try to develop drugs, then you may actually have off-target effects, which can be for other methyltransferases, and you end up maybe, I should be saying, maybe off chance of killing yourself rather than killing the bacteria alone. You may kill the bacteria along with yourself. So these are like the kinases have the same problem. If I don't know, have studied I don't know whether you're working with the kinases. I had worked a lot with the kinases in my postdoc, and people they still use it, many of them, but they have a lot of off-target effects because there the ATP binding site is one of the important sites that is used, and many times use taurosporin, which is the analog, as a starting, and then you try to make many drugs. The kinases, which are very, very successful, they have secondary allosteric sites, like the HER kinase, for example, EGFR. So they have secondary sites which are allosteric sites. Now, if you go at the ATP binding site, you can still, if you can, sometimes you think that if I have cancer, let me have all the side effects, but if I can cure myself first, that's more important. Living is more important. So in this case, you still go with some of those drugs because there is always a panel of kinases, and you will see lots of kinases will show activity which you may not sometimes be informed about these cross-activity effects. So here what we tried to do was we tried to not look at the SAM binding inhibitors. We tried to look at allosteric inhibitors. And from our studies, what we found out was that that it is this region that I am pointing out here is where that bulge region goes. And this can, if you don't allow the RNA recognition to happen here at the ERN site, then it's unique to that pathogenic site, then reaction doesn't happen here. So we will not go at the SAM site, we will go at this site. That way it's an allosteric site. So off-target effects will be minimalized because this pocket and this combination is present uniquely in ERNs. I hope I answered that part of the question. Okay. And viral bacteriophages basically to eat the bacteria, right? Is what you were thinking of using?
Yeah.
That they will be bacteriophages.
Yeah.
Autophagy. So you can, I don't know much about it, but I'm very worried about our own immune system reacting to them. And maybe that is why they are not being used so much. And the side effects that can happen if our immune system goes haywire. I'm thinking that is why they do not use this viral bacteriophages. I'm not sure about the answer.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, any other panelists have any other question? Udipta?
Yes, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. I am Udipta from Delhi Technological University. So I am third year undergraduate. So I wanted to ask something about protein-based biosensors. So maybe so I wanted to ask that if we can design. So what's the approach to design a capture probe for like virus-based like this corona, and how should we deal with the cross reactivity and issues with like designing?
What do you want to do? You want to develop a sensor to look whether corona is there or not?
Yeah. So, diagnostic tools. So for like virus-based thing, yeah, and anything like that.
So I would say that you should go for a recognition. Antibody-based would be the one to do for this one is the easiest. If you have a coronavirus antibody that takes a viral protein, then you can maybe engineer that antibody to have maybe a fluorescent marker or something like that. And once the interaction with the virus happens, the changes in fluorescence will happen. For example, the fluorescence may be quenched, you may see nothing, or you may see enhanced fluorescence, and that could be a diagnostic way. But if you want to do for viral detection, I think if you see there are these antibody tests that are also available, but they have the secondary antibody with it, not the primary one. So you have the primary antibody, and then there is a secondary. So there are a lot of antibody tests that are available that they are saying that they're going to try to now market, right? And
No,
I think they're
actually,
based on antibody based.
actually, I went through your papers. Like I have been following your papers. Like I followed your paper on benzene detection. Like that, I wanted
Yeah, yeah.
to. Yeah, so I was
That
thinking
kind
of
of
something.
is very
Yeah.
difficult to develop a virus. That's why I was saying.
Okay.
So for
Okay.
small molecule detection, you can do these kinds of we were doing, where we have these benzene and toluene and various molecule detectors. So what you can do is you can go to the natural system, and you can what we have done at least, and we have been trying to do in other systems also. There are many of these bacteria, and they have natural sensors for these molecules. You can start with a natural sensor, and then you can do mutation and evolution of the active site to whatever molecule that you of your choice that you want, and then you have to have a detection system with it, and that ways
So
you can
we,
develop for any molecule,
so
but not for
basically
a
study.
virus.
So basically we study the interactions first, and then go with the
So first you
designing
have
of
to find out, suppose you want to, let's say, change the molecule. Let's change the molecule. Let's say you want an amino acid sensor. Okay.
Okay.
So first you need to find in the whole of the biological systems, proteins which have natural amino acid sensing ability. Okay. Then you want to take out that protein and make it in your lab. And now you want to change the amino acid. Suppose it was amino acid sensor for leucine. You want to make it for isoleucine, or you want to make it for valine. So now you would go through a couple of approaches, mutagenesis or directed evolution approaches, things like that, where you change the active site such that it can now adapt itself to do a valine sensing, but you keep the entire system same. And for detection, you can have, we have an ATPase assay, a conformational change, you can have GF, some kind of assay that you can link it with, you can have. But you need a natural sensor if you want to do biological sensing. You need a natural sensor to be picked up from the actual whole plethora of enzymes available to you.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Absolutely. Is there any other question from any panelist if Padampriya and Divya wants to ask maybe the last question? All right. Thank you so much, Ruchi, for answering so many questions, and with the passion you have, really make people understand and help them out. I think this is highly valuable. And this was primarily the goal for us, during the time when people are not able to access and meet, and let's have something. So I thank all the participants, and many thanks to Ruchi for taking the time out and delivering such a fantastic talk, and with so much patience and zeal answering all the questions. We look forward, probably series 2 soon, and find another opportunity to interact in future. Thank you,
Thank you.
Ruchi.
Thank you for this opportunity to talk to everyone. Even during the lockdown period, I feel a little useful than not doing anything. And I would also thank all the people for giving the suggestions and the questions. It has been a very, very fulfilling experience. And again, I would like to wish everyone to stay indoors, social distancing, and be safe and healthy.
Sure.
And I hope that we can get and help some of the questions wanted us to have. My son is trying to ask questions now.
Bring him, actually. Arinko is fantastic. He got on.
I think we can discuss later.
So he got excited asking question, right? You responding to my question. Beware of. Absolutely.
And he's been scolded
Okay.
for being actually curious.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so
I
much.
will end,
Yeah, everyone stay safe. Please be indoor, and it is worth showing a little bit more patience for a few more days, and hope life resumes back to normal soon. And thank you, everyone. It was a fantastic experience to have you all.